Namaste and good morning to all of you. Let's start our class with some Gita verses, which are called Gita Dhyanam or Gita Stuti. So basically what we do in these verses, we are thanking Lord Krishna, thanking Rishi Vyas who wrote it, thanking Gita, the scripture itself. So that's what we are doing. Okay. Om Parthaye Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayan Swayam Vyasen Grathitam Puran Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitamritvarshine Bhagavati Mashtadashadhyayane Am Tvam Anusandhame Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshine Namo Astute Vyas Vishal Buddhe Full Arvind Ayat Patra Netar Yen Tavya Bharat Tail Purnaha प्रज्वलितो ज्ञान में प्रदीप प्रपान्न पारे जाताए तोत्र वेत्र एक पाने ज्ञान मुद्राए कृष्णाए गीता अमृत दुहे नमः सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोगदा गोपाल नंदना पार्थो वत्सा सुधीर भोगता दुग्धम गीता अमृतम महत वसुदेव सुतम देवम कंस चानूरमर्दनम देवकी परमानंदम कृष्णम वंदे जगत गुरुम भीष्म द्रोण तटा जयद्रथ जला गांधार नीलोत्पला शल्य ग्राहवती कृपेन वहने कर्णेन वेला खुला अश्वत्थाम विकर्ण घोर मकरा दुर्योधन अवर्तने सोतीर्णा खलु पांडवै रन्नति कवर्तका केशवा पाराशरे वत्सरोजमलम गीता अर्थ गंधोटकम नानाख्यानक केसरम हरि कथा संबोधन अबोधितम लोके सज्जन षटपद रह पे पिये मानम मुदा व्याद भारत पंकजम कलिमल प्रध्वंसे न श्रेयसे मूकम करोति वाचालम पंगुम लंघ्यते गिरिम यत्कृपा तमहं वंदे परमानंद माधवम यम ब्रह्म वरुणेन्द्र रुद्रमर्तः स्तुन्वन्ति दिव्ये स्तवे वेदै सांग पद क्रम उपनिषदे गायन्ति यम सामगा ध्यानवस्थे तद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यम योगिनो यस्यन्तं न विदुसुर असुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः. So today is Bhagavad Gita's day, and we started chapter number 5 last week. Karam Sanyas Yoga. Karam Sanyas. And this chapter started with Arjun's question. He says, which one is better? Performance of actions or renunciation of actions? Sanyasam karam nam krishan punha yogam chansasi. Yat shreya etyo ekam tat me bruhi sunischitam. So he's saying, please tell me conclusively, decisively, which is the better of the two? And the rest of the chapter is to answer this question. Because Lord Krishna could see that Arjun doesn't understand the real meaning yet of a Gyan Yoga, or if you want to call it a Sanyas Yoga, or a Karam Yoga. Okay, so we are on verse number 5. That's where we are starting our class today. And this is what Lord Krishna's answer to Arjun, or continued answer to Arjun. Yat sakhyai prapyate sthanam tat yogai api gamyate ekam sankhyam cha yogam cha yapashyati sapashyati. Yat means that Sankhya, by the Sankhya's. And over here Sankhya means the Jnanis, the knowledge lovers. Prapyate, reached. Sathanam, place. Tat means that. Yogai, by the yogi. And this yog means Karam yogi. Api means also. Gamyate is reached. Ekam, one. Sankhyam, the knowledge. Cha means and. Yogam, performance of action. Karam yoga. Cha means and. Ya means who. Pashyati, sees. Sa means he. Pashyati, sees. So Lord Krishna is saying that place which is reached by the Jnanis, is also reached by the Karam yogis. He sees who sees Sankhya and Yoga as one. So Lord Krishna is insisting over here that the goal to be reached by both is the same. Whether they have embarked on the path of Karam Yoga or embarked on the path of Gyan Yoga. And word Pashyati, seeing, is a philosophical meaning. We got to look at it. So it's not a mere physical act of perception. This seeing is used here to confirm the experience of reality. Or you can say subjective experience, intimate experience, experience beyond all doubts. It's almost like when we see some object with our own eyes, there's no doubt. So this is how the seeing is, a seeing of the Atma or Paramatma. So that's why he says, in spiritual practice, the intention of the mind is what matters, not the external activities. Because Karam Yogi is also walking on the path of yoga, Karam Yoga, to attain the highest. And the Gyan Yogi also, because goal is the same for both. So that's why he's saying they both reach at the same place. Okay. And how is it that the aim of Karam Yoga and the Sankhya Yoga is the same? He says, listen. Sanyasa tu mahabahu dukkham aptum ayogata yog yuktaha muni brahma na chiren adhigachati. This is verse number 6. Sanyasaha, renunciation. Tu means but, mahabaho, that is for Arjun, oh mighty armed. Dukkham, dukkham means hard, difficult. Aptum, to attain. Ayogata, without Karam Yoga. Yog yuktaha, yoga harmonized, yukta. Muni means a sage, a contemplator. Brahma, that means absolute truth. Na chiren, without delay, that means quickly. Adhigachati, goes. But renunciation, oh mighty armed, is hard to attain without yoga. Okay, without yoga means without becoming a Karam Yogi first. The yoga harmonized person of steady contemplation quickly goes to Brahma. Now take your mind towards the previous verse, verse number 3. The qualities of a sannyasi who neither hates nor desires, free from fears of the opposites. So do we have those qualities? If we have these qualities, then definitely we are a sannyasi. So sannyasi doesn't mean don't do the work. Sannyasi really means fully detached, still doing the work. So over here he says, this sannyas is hard to attain without Karam Yoga. So this is like a final conclusion, according to him, that the place of right action in self is rediscovery. And without performance of action, the renunciation of action is impossible. Because without having a thing, you cannot renounce it. It's almost like some teachers, they give the example of polishing of a certain vessel, like a silver jar or a jug you want to polish. You just take some kind of a polish and rub on it and then wash it. So the whole process of rubbing is to clean. The whole process of doing the action as a Karam Yogi is for the purification. Purification. So polishing of the mind is a process very similar to cleaning any kind of a metal. Without action, without karam, we cannot do it. See, just like a polish is the solvent of the oxide that is covering that silver jar. So at the same time, we remove our own dirt on our mind by doing the actions. So while performing our duties in this world, we should slowly learn to rise above the flaws. And what are those flaws? Greed, desires, anger, infatuation. All those, we need to just let those go while doing our duties. So first, if we first give up the duties, it is very difficult to purify the mind. So while doing the duties, we are supposed to purify our mind. Because without a pure mind, true detachment remains a distant dream. We can all dream about it, but it's not ours. There's no experience. Just like they say, unripe fruit, if you try to break it, versus if it's a fully ripened fruit, you touch it, it just comes in your hand. So the same way we keep on cleaning ourselves with the help of our duties, and we are there in no time. So mind can be purified only by the process of treating it with the right action. And right action means not getting attached. See what we learned in the last couple of verses, or last couple of chapters, I should say. The Karam Yogi does the duties without getting attached to the fruits and does it very selflessly and lovingly and skillfully. Then you get detached from it. So extrovertedness of the mind is not conducive to the inner polishing. Extroverted. The mind which just keeps on running into the outer field. So by doing our duties, keeping our mind in the inner realm. That's what he's teaching us. So he is giving us a positive assurance here that such a conducive mental quality can be created by the right actions, by the sadhaks. And that person is called Yoga Yukta. Okay? Unattached with the outer activities and constantly being aware of the inner self. Okay? So then he gives us a very definite assurance that no chirain, not long afterwards. It doesn't take that long. We got to do just our part, then you are there. So with this knowledge in mind, when we read this verse, it becomes very clear what Lord Krishna was saying in the verse number 2 also, in his opening verse, when he said performance of action is superior to the renunciation of action. So when we understand this, what is trying to tell us? That performance of action, you are purifying your mind. If you right away say that, no, I want to become a renunciate, mind is not pure, that is not right. So when the devotee resorts to Karam Yoga as a means of attaining right knowledge, he's giving us some further clarification over here in the next verse. Yog yuktaha vishuddha atma vijit atma jitendriya sarva bhutatma kurvan api na lipyate. Yog yukta, united in consciousness with God. Okay, Yog yukta, or you can say devoted to the path of action. Vishuddhatma, a person of a purified intellect or mind. Vijitatma, one who has conquered the mind. Jitendriya, one who has subdued his senses, or the senses are in his control. Sarvabhut Atma Bhutatma, one who realizes his self in all beings. Kurvan, acting, performing. Api means even though. Na means not. Lipyate, tainted or entangled. And this entanglement is a mental entanglement. He who is devoted to the path of action, whose mind is quite pure, who has conquered the self, the mind, or the ego, you can call it. This Atma word can be used so many different ways. We can understand it. Who has subdued his senses, who realizes his self as the self in all beings, even though acting is not tainted. Okay, so such a Karam yogi with a purified intellect is a seeing God situated in all living beings and behave respectfully. We see that over here, Sarvatma, Bhutatma. But without attachment. Because the actions are not motivated by the desire for self-enjoyment. Their knowledge is progressively clarified. This Gyan is becoming higher and higher. The senses, the mind, the intellect, they are completely under his control. These instruments, because these are the instruments, this body is an instrument, senses are instrument, mind is instrument, intellect is instrument. So this instrument is now available for the service of Lord. And that's what we learned in the last chapter. All those yajnas, that's what it meant. Whatever you do it yajna rupi. Because this devotional service or seva leads to realized knowledge from within. Because knowledge is already there. We got to just tap into it. In this way, Karam Yoga naturally take you towards the successive stages of enlightenment. Karam Yoga. So that's why Lord Krishna again and again telling us to do your duties first. How to do the duties? What are we supposed to do? Very logical and very precise way he's telling us what to do. So it's a logic of the state of inward revolution that will take place and take us towards the infinite in us. And anybody who is well established in this Karam Yoga, he says, accomplishes purification of the intellect. Okay. So any purification in the subtle body means a better state of calmness inward. If you want to know if our mind or intellect is getting purified, look at the state of your mind. See, just like if you want to say that my body is pure, physically it's pure, we get sick less. There's a better immune system. Otherwise, bacteria and the viruses, they're all there all the time. But a healthy body can fight it. The same way, this healthy intellect and the mind, when we keep it pure, there is a calmness inside our mind. That's all we know. That is a test, or you can call it a litmus test. Any given time, is my mind calm or is it agitated? Lesser the agitations caused in us by our desires or emotions, because all those agitations are because of desires and emotions, the purer we are internally. Through action, when it is selfless and without anxiety for the fruits, a sadhak is exhausting the vasanas. And vasanas are all the old impressions. We need to learn how to exhaust them. And when the inner equipment, the antekaran, is clean, all the waves of our desires, they become more and more quiet and peaceful. So, in other words, through Karam Yoga, we can gain inward peace, both at the mental level and intellectual level. And right now, if we see that there's an agitation, we got to look at it. Do we know what Karam Yogi is? Because Lord Krishna says, without being a Karam Yogi, you cannot be established in the self, or even before that, becoming Gyan Yogi. That is the message Lord Krishna is giving it to us. But once we have cleaned our mind and the intellect, it becomes a child's play. To restrain yourself, to control your lower urges, to guide your sense organs, or even their never-ending appetites. So a yogi who has controlled his body, his mind, his intellect is best fitted for the highest meditations. Okay, so that's why he said Yog Yukta Vishuddh Atma Vijit Atma and Jitendriya. But still he says that is not enough. Sarvabhutatma, Bhutatma, seeing the same God everywhere and in everybody. It's not only realization of your divinity, but the divinity of the self, which is infinite and which is all pervading. That's where he's taking us. That's why he sees nothing but divinity everywhere, in everyone, at all times. At all times too. So Lord Krishna is saying such a person realizes his own self as the self in all beings. In this consciousness of universality, like a Sarva Atma, Bhut Atma, when a yogi acts, what exactly will be his attitude in life? Because this person is not just sitting like a stone. This yogi is very active in this world. At workplace also, in the marketplace also, in the family also. So how does he act? Let's look at number 8 and 9 together. Because we do all these actions and yogi does all these actions too. How do we do it and how does yogi does it? This is what we have to look at it. Differentiation of these two. So Lord Krishna says, Na eva kinchit karoti iti yuktaha manyet tattvavit pashyan shrivan sprishan chigran ashnan gachan swapan shwasan pralapan visrijan grahan unmission nimission api indriyane indriyartheshu vartante iti dharyan. Let's go back to verse number 8, because I just recited both 8 and 9. Na means not, ev means even. Kinchit, anything. Kuromi, I do. Iti means thus. Yuktaha. Yukta is who is centered in the self. Yoga yukta. Manyet thinks. Tattvavit, the knower of the truth. Pashyan, seeing. Shrivan, hearing. Suppression, touching. Jigran, smelling. Ashnan, eating. Gachan, going or moving. Swapan, sleeping. Shwasan, breathing. I do nothing at all. This is his attitude. Like, I am not the doer. Thus would the harmonized knower of the truth think. Seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, going, sleeping, breathing. Verse number 9. Pralapan, speaking. Visrijan, letting go or giving up. Grihan, seizing or accepting. Unmission, opening the eyes. Nimission, closing the eyes. Api means also. Indriyani, the senses. Indriya artheshu, among the sense objects. Vartante, move. Iti means thus. Dharyan, being convinced. This is his dharana, conviction. Speaking, letting go, seizing, opening, and closing the eyes. Convinced that the senses move among the sense objects. See, like when we are sleeping, we are breathing. Can we say that we are breathing? Breathing is happening. So yogi is all the time like that. All these activities are happening in the Prakriti part of me, and I am not that. So he is convinced in that I am the Atma, and Atma doesn't do anything. Who does it? Prakriti does. And what is Prakriti in me? Anything other than the Atma is Prakriti. So this is such a perfect one, he says. Yukta Manyet Tattvavit. He's not sitting like a statue or a stone statue. He's acting diligently like any one of us. But all these natural activities, he knows who's acting. He's aware of it. So in all these unavoidable activities, opening the eyes, closing the eyes, going somewhere, touching something, doing something, unavoidable. So that's why Lord Krishna is explaining here to us, a sage or a prophet living in this world will not have any egoistic vanity. Egoistic, like I am doing it. I amness is at the where it should be, the Atma. Because normally whenever we accomplish anything substantial, we are overcome with a pride that we have done something great. The pride of being the doer of one's action is a stumbling block to rising beyond material consciousness. So Karam Yogi has a God consciousness, and he has overcome the obstacle with the ease because he has purified himself. So with purified or purification, they see themselves as very separately from the body and themselves. This is my body, I am not the body. Just like we can see this is a house we live in, we are not the house. Or we drive the car, but we are not the car. Sure, there's a purpose for driving the car. There's a purpose for living in the house. And the same way, there's a purpose of residing in this beautiful human body. So they never forget the purpose. And they don't get entangled, Karam Yogis, ultimately, when they have purified themselves. They attribute their bodily actions to the Prakriti, not to themselves. They attribute all their actions. It's done by the power of God, but it's done by the Prakriti. So that's what it means. I do nothing at all. It's not that they don't do anything. They do a beautiful, whatever, wherever they are. Their duties, they do beautifully. But because they are not sleepwalkers. Because a sleepwalker is who? Unconscious. But the sage or a yogi is ever conscious of his consciousness, never forgets it. Okay, very centered, steadfast. This is what the yukta means. Centered in the self. We are constantly centered in the external world, and external world keeps on changing. That's why we are never centered anywhere. Our center keeps on shifting, but they are centered in the self. And this self-centeredness can be of two grades of intensity. So it can be self-centeredness of a seeker through reflection, through study, through meditation. So they first remain intellectually centered in the self. That is the first stage of sadhana, okay, which is called Shravana Manana Nidhi Dhyasana. That's very important. And once the self-absorption in the self, and finally they realize the self in them, they come to live vitally at every moment the experience of the self. Atamavit. Okay? Atamavit. Man of perfection, living in unison with the truth, is an observer of the varieties of his own actions. It's like a seeing what my eyes are doing, what my hands are doing, where my legs are going. So definitely very much conscious, and the awareness is there of the various movements of the layers of this Prakriti. But he himself is a watcher. And he is unperturbed also. Because the minute there's a perturbance, then you lose sight. It's almost like if there's a perturbance in the water, you don't see the bottom. Over here, if there's a perturbance in the mind, you don't see your real self. So what should be the attitude of a person who is not a truth knower and is engaged in action? Because over here in this verse is telling us who knows it, who is a tattvavid. But a person who is not, what happens to that person? Stays agitated. Okay? So now let's look at it. Brahmani adhaye karmani sangam tyaktva kroti lipyate na sa papena padam patram iv ambasa. Brahmane, in Brahma, in God, adhaye, having placed. That means dedicating. Karmani, all actions. Sang means attachment. Tyaktva, having abandoned. Kroti, performs or does, acts. Ya means who. Lipyate, affected or tainted. Na means not. Sa, he, that means that person. Papen, by sin. Padam patram, lotus leaf. Iv means like, ambasa, by water. He who does actions, offering them to Brahma, abandoning attachment, is not tainted by sin. Just as a lotus leaf remains unaffected by the water on it. If you remember, Arjuna was disturbed because his actions, he thought, are sinful actions. Waging the war against his teacher, against his guru. So Lord Krishna is teaching him how to be a Karam yogi and even beyond that. Okay? So in this divine consciousness, the Karam yogi is merely an instrument in the hands of God. Okay, it's a God's play happening. You are just merely an instrument. So what has been said in the previous verse? Because he's in the previous verse, he's saying, the previous two verses, that a person, a yogi of that caliber, thinks that I'm not doing anything, I'm not a doer. So it may be true for only very few people. The rare few, they say, they have realized the truth. But how is it available to us? This is what he's telling us over here. What do we need to practice? So it's almost like a prescription. He's writing it for us for perfection. Every one of us can come to live the life of this kind of a vairagya, this kind of a detachment. That's why he is giving us a beautiful analogy of a padam patra, the lotus leaf. But the very first thing he says, resigning to Brahma. Brahmani adhai, dedicating to Brahma. Total detachment is impossible in the beginning. But we have to understand it at least, where we are going. Because as long as the mind is there, it will attach to something. So if the mind is attached to the external world, he's telling us that attach this mind to God. So detachment from the false can be done only when we attach ourselves to the real. So this is what really means over here when he says, Brahmani adhai. When mind goes somewhere else, bring it back at the feet of your Guru or God. So this is a very, this advice he has been giving, and he's going to keep on giving. That really means to surrender all your attachments to Brahma. All your attachment, all your love. To remember constantly an ideal is to become more attuned to the perfections of the ideal. So we keep thinking about the ideal, then we become like that too. So we have to remember this concept of truth. As often as we are remembering our own limited ego. Right now, our name, our personality is so dear to us, we keep on thinking about it. We got to just to switch it around. The frequency of our thoughts upon the God should become higher. More times we think about God. More times we think about we are the Atma. That's why they say that most of us, most of the people are ego-realized souls. Okay? Because soul is there, but ego-realized. We got to switch it around. We got to become soul-realized egos. So realization of the soul. And that can happen only if we practice it. Whatever we practice, whatever we keep thinking again and again, that's what we become. So once our real nature is realized, the actions of the body, mind, and intellect can no longer leave any impression upon us. Because all the pap and punya, meritorious deeds, are the opposite of those. They belong to the ego, prakriti, not to the Atma. Atma does not have any flaw. Atma is beyond pap and punya. It's almost like if I am looking at myself in some kind of a reflection, it could be a pool of water, and a pool of water is shaking. I am still, but what is shaking? The reflection, not me. And then he is giving us a beautiful analogy, as I said, lotus leaf in the water. Lotus leaf exists in the water, draws its nourishment from the water, dies away in the same water, but during its life, it does not allow itself to be moistened by the water. Okay, so what is this water for us? For us, the water is this Maya. Without this Maya, without this Prakriti, this body cannot be sustained. It came out of it. It is being nourished by it. Ultimately, it's going to go back into it. So we should stay detached from it. And we should know who we are. So saint or a yogi in this world, as a matter entity, draws the nourishment for his individual existence from the world of objects, but ever remains perfectly detached. That's a yogi. So yogi eats just like we do, but attitude is different. Yogi works also, attitude is different. From his own merits and demerits, from his own concepts of beauty and ugliness, from his own likes and dislikes, in the outer world, he stays perfectly detached. Hindu scriptures, they give these analogies of the lotus flower throughout. The feet of a guru or a feet of God, what do we call it? Charna Kamal, right? Lot of bhajans are written like that. Lotus-like feet, because the beautiful lotus. Kamal Akshen, lotus-like eyes. Kar Kamal also. We say our Guru touched us with his Kar Kamal, lotus-like hands. Another word for the lotus is also Pankaj. That means born from the mud. So lotus flower is often used in the literature as an example of something that is born in the dirt, in the water, but stay risen above it, keeping its beauty so pure. So the same way we got to live. Okay, we got to always remember the lotus. We got to learn how to float on the surface, not get drowned in this mush. Okay, and don't even let yourself get wet as a Karam yogi. So in other words, Karam yogi remains untouched by sin, although performing all the actions, because they are performed with a divine consciousness. So instead of doing your duties, doing all the actions with a material consciousness is what? What will get out of it? What will others think? Are they getting more than I am getting? That's a material consciousness. So worldly consciousness. We got to do everything with divine consciousness. And because of this, because a yogi acts like this, with this kind of attitude, we will see next week in verse number 11, what really happens to him. What is the outcome of it? Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you very much.